Castigaran al ranchero casándolo con una esclava, Apache y vendiéndolo por $5 to do cambio. The morning began like any other in the small ranching town, with dust floating in the air and the sound of horses moving slowly across the open land. But for the rancher, this day was different. He did not know it yet, but by sunset his life would be turned upside down in a way he could never have imagined. He was a hardworking man, known for waking before the sun and sleeping only when his body could no longer move. His ranch was not the biggest, but it was honest. He had built it with his own hands, piece by piece, after years of struggle. He believed in fairness, in earning what you owned, and in standing by your word. That belief, however, made him dangerous to certain people. The town was controlled by a few powerful men. They owned large lands, controlled trade, and decided who would rise and who would fall. The rancher had always refused to bow his head to them. When they demanded unfair taxes, he questioned them. When they tried to take part of his land, he said no. He did not shout or threaten. He simply stood firm, and that firmness made them angry. For a long time they watched him quietly, waiting for the right moment. They spread small rumors, hoping to weaken his name. They whispered that he was difficult, that he thought too highly of himself, but the people knew him. They had seen his honesty, his kindness, and his hard work. The rumors did not grow the way the powerful men had hoped, so they decided to make an example of him. On that morning, a group of men arrived at his ranch. They wore official clothes and spoke with loud voices, as if the law itself was walking beside them. They told him he was ordered to appear in the town square. When he asked why, they gave no clear answer. Still, he went with them because he had nothing to hide. The town square slowly filled with people. Some came out of curiosity, others because they were told to come. The rancher stood in the center, feeling the weight of many eyes on him. He noticed familiar faces, neighbors, traders, even people he had helped in the past. Some looked confused. Others looked afraid. A few looked away, unwilling to be seen watching. The leaders of the town stepped forward. Their voices were calm, but their eyes held something cold. They accused the rancher of disrespecting authority, of causing unrest, of refusing cooperation. None of the accusations were truly clear and none were proven, but proof was never their goal. Control was. The rancher tried to speak, to explain himself, but he was quickly silenced. They told him that his punishment would serve as a lesson to anyone else who dared to challenge them. The crowd grew quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Then they announced the punishment. He would be forced into a marriage he had never agreed to, not for love, not for choice, but for shame. The woman was an Apache, someone they had already stripped of freedom and dignity. To them, she was not a person but a tool. By joining them, they believed they were breaking both at once. As if that was not enough, they declared that the rancher himself would be sold for $5. It was not a real sale, but a symbol meant to crush him. $5, an amount so small it turned his life, his work, and his pride into a joke. Laughter rose from a few corners of the crowd, but most people stood in silence, unsure of what to feel. The rancher felt heat rise in his chest. Not fear, not even anger at first, but disbelief. He had faced hardship before, but never this kind of public humiliation. He looked at the ground, breathing slowly, trying to understand how standing for what was right had led him here. Then he saw her. She stood a short distance away, guarded closely. She was quiet, her posture straight but tired. Her face showed no tears, only a deep, steady calm that came from enduring too much for too long. Her eyes did not beg and they did not accuse. They simply observed. In that moment, the rancher realized something important. This punishment was not only meant for him, it was meant for her too. They were both being used, both being pushed into a role they had not chosen. The ceremony was quick and empty of warmth. Words were spoken without meaning. Promises were demanded without consent. When it was over, the town leaders stepped back, satisfied. To them, the matter was closed. The rancher had been reduced and the woman had been placed where they wanted her. The crowd slowly dispersed. No one cheered. No one celebrated. The dust rose again as people walked away, carrying the heavy memory of what they had witnessed. Some felt guilt. Some felt relief that it was not them standing there. And some felt fear, knowing how easily power could turn cruel. The rancher and the woman were left standing together, strangers tied by force. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with pain, confusion, and uncertainty. Eventually, they were told to leave the square and return to the rancher's land. Not as an owner and a free man, but as someone marked and watched. The walk back was long. Each step felt heavier than the last. When they reached the ranch, the sun was already low. The familiar land no longer felt the same. What had once been a place of pride now felt like a reminder of loss. The rancher unlocked the door and stepped aside, unsure of what to do next. He was a man who had always known his purpose. Now that purpose felt stolen. The woman entered quietly. She did not explore or ask questions. She simply stood there, waiting as if expecting orders. That hurt him more than any insult he had faced that day. He realized she had been trained by cruelty to expect nothing good. That night, neither of them slept much. The rancher sat at the table, staring at his hands, thinking of all he had lost in a single day. The woman lay quietly in another room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this new place would be any different from the past ones. Outside, the land remained silent, holding the weight of what had happened. The punishment that was meant to destroy had been carried out. The town believed the story was over, but they were wrong. That day did not end a life. It began a long and difficult change, one that no one watching from the square could have predicted. The days after the punishment passed slowly, as if time itself had become heavier. Morning came and went, but nothing felt normal anymore. The rancher woke up early out of habit, yet his body felt tired in a way he had never known before. His land was the same, the sky was the same, but inside him everything felt broken and unfamiliar. He stepped outside and began his usual work. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and walked the fields. He worked because it was the only thing he knew how to do, and because stopping would mean thinking too much. Every sound felt louder in the silence. Every memory of the town square returned again and again in his mind. Inside the small house, the woman remained quiet. She moved slowly, carefully, as if trying not to be noticed. She cleaned what little there was to clean, arranged things that did not need arranging, and stayed out of his way. Years of being controlled had taught her that silence was safer than questions. They shared the same space, but they lived like strangers. They ate at different times. They avoided each other's eyes. Words felt dangerous, as if saying the wrong thing could cause another punishment to fall from the sky. At night, the rancher lay awake, listening to the wind move across the land. He thought about how quickly respect could be taken away. He thought about the $5, the number that had turned his life into a cruel joke. But more than that, he thought about her. He wondered what kind of life she had lived before this place. He wondered how much pain a person had to endure before silence became their only protection. The woman also lay awake at night. She listened for footsteps, for raised voices, for signs of danger. Her body was always ready to react, even when nothing was happening. She did not trust quiet moments. In her past, quiet often came before something bad. She remembered her people, the open land, and the way life once felt connected and whole. Those memories hurt, but they were also the only things that reminded her who she truly was. She did not know what this new life would bring. All she knew was that she had survived so far, and survival was something she was good at. One morning, the rancher noticed that food had been prepared before he returned from the fields. It was simple but warm. He paused, unsure how to react. No one had done something like that for him in a long time. When she entered the room, he nodded slightly. It was not much, but it was the first sign of acknowledgement between them. She nodded back, her eyes briefly meeting his before looking away again. That small moment changed something. Over the next few days, they began to exist around each other rather than apart. They still did not talk much, but their movements became less tense. The rancher made sure there was always enough food. He left space, never ordering or demanding. The woman noticed this. She had seen many kinds of men, and she knew the signs of cruelty. He showed none of them. One afternoon, while he was repairing a broken fence, she quietly came outside and handed him a tool he had dropped. Their fingers did not touch, but the closeness made both of them pause. He thanked her softly. She did not reply, but she did not leave right away either. From that day on, she began to help more openly. She worked in the garden, tended to small tasks around the ranch, and observed how things were done. She was careful, but she was also skilled. The rancher noticed that she understood the land in a way that surprised him. She knew when soil needed rest and how plants responded to care rather than force. He did not question her knowledge. He watched and learned. The town, meanwhile, watched from a distance. People whispered again, but this time the whispers were uncertain. They expected to see a broken man and a miserable household. Instead, they saw order, quiet effort, and a ranch that continued to function. It confused them. Some neighbors avoided the place completely, afraid of being connected to a punished man. Others watched with curiosity. A few felt regret but were too afraid to act on it. One evening, a storm rolled in suddenly. The wind grew strong and the sky darkened quickly. The rancher rushed to secure what he could. The woman followed without being asked. Rain began to fall hard and thunder shook the ground. As they worked side by side, a sudden loud crack split the air. A tree branch fell close by, missing them by only a few steps. The woman froze, her breathing quick and shallow. Old fear returned without warning. The rancher noticed immediately. He gently guided her inside the house, keeping his voice calm. He gave her space, speaking softly until the storm passed. He did not touch her or force comfort. He simply stayed nearby. When the storm ended, something had shifted between them. Trust, fragile and small, had begun to form. That night she spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet and careful, as if unused. She did not tell her full story. She only said that she had known fear for a long time and that the storm reminded her of it. The rancher listened without interrupting. He did not ask questions. When she finished, he thanked her for trusting him enough to speak. From then on, words slowly entered their shared life. They spoke about the land, about work, about simple things. Sometimes silence returned, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt shared. The rancher told her about his ranch, how he built it, and what it had meant to him before everything changed. She listened closely, understanding loss more than she wanted to. She told him small pieces of her past, stories of community, of learning from elders, of living with respect for the earth. These moments were brief but meaningful. The rancher began to see her not as part of a punishment, but as a person with strength and history. As days turned into weeks, they became a quiet team. They did not need many words. They understood each other through actions. The rancher's anger softened. The woman's constant fear slowly loosened its grip. They were still marked by what had been done to them. The town had not forgotten. Neither had they, but something new was growing in the space where pain once ruled. What was meant to break them was beginning to connect them. Neither of them knew it yet, but this shared survival was laying the foundation for a future no one had planned, and one the town would never expect. Life on the ranch slowly found a new rhythm. It was not an easy rhythm, and it was not joyful yet, but it was steady. Each day followed a simple pattern: work at sunrise, quiet hours in the afternoon, and calm evenings when the light faded and shadows stretched across the land. In this routine, something important began to change inside both of them. The rancher no longer worked only to escape his thoughts. He worked with purpose again, even if that purpose was different from before. He noticed how the land responded when it was treated gently. He noticed how small changes brought better results. Much of that learning came from watching her. She moved through the fields with care, observing the soil, the plants, and the sky. She paid attention to signs he had ignored for years. When he asked why she did something a certain way, she explained patiently. Her words were simple, but they carried deep understanding. She spoke of balance, of giving the land time to rest, of listening instead of forcing results. At first, the rancher felt a quiet shame. He had always believed hard work alone was enough. Now he realized that wisdom mattered just as much. Instead of feeling threatened, he chose to learn. That choice marked a turning point. They began to talk more openly, not about painful memories at first, but about everyday things. He spoke about weather patterns, animals, and tools. She shared thoughts about seasons, signs in nature, and the way her people once lived in harmony with the land. These conversations were calm and respectful. Neither tried to control the other. Slowly, laughter returned to the ranch. It was rare at first, a soft sound that surprised them both. One afternoon, while trying to fix a stubborn gate, the rancher made a small mistake and laughed at himself. The woman smiled without realizing it. For a moment, the weight they carried lifted. That moment stayed with them. The town continued to watch. People noticed that the ranch was improving, not falling apart as expected. Crops grew stronger. Animals appeared healthier. The land seemed alive in a way it had not been before. This confused those who believed punishment always led to ruin. Some of the same people who had stood silent in the town square now whispered again, but their tone had changed. There was uncertainty and even a hint of fear. They had wanted a lesson in obedience. Instead, they were seeing resilience. One afternoon, a trader passed by the ranch. He slowed his horse and looked around, surprised by what he saw. He greeted the rancher politely, then glanced at the woman with uncertainty. Old beliefs were hard to let go of. Still, he did business and left without trouble. Word spread that the punished ranch was still standing strong. Inside the house, life felt different too. Meals were shared more often. Silence no longer felt heavy. Sometimes they talked late into the night, sitting across from each other with a small lamp between them. Other times, they simply listened to the sounds of the land and felt content in quiet company. The woman began to change in small but important ways. Her posture relaxed. Her eyes no longer scanned the room constantly for danger. She began to hum softly while working, an old habit from a life she thought she had lost forever. Those sounds filled the house with warmth. The rancher noticed these changes and felt a deep sense of responsibility. He knew he could not undo the past, but he could protect the present. He made it clear through actions that this was a place of safety. He never raised his voice. He never demanded. Trust, once broken, was being rebuilt piece by piece. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, the woman shared more of her story. She spoke of being taken from her people, of being moved from place to place, never allowed to settle. She did not describe events in detail. She did not need to. The emotion in her voice said enough. The rancher listened with respect. When she finished, he did not respond with empty words. He simply said that no one deserved to be treated as less than human. His voice was steady, but his eyes reflected deep emotion. That night, he realized something important. The punishment that was meant to strip him of dignity had instead shown him a truth he had never fully understood before. He had lost control over his life, even briefly, and that loss had changed him. It had opened his eyes to suffering beyond his own. From that point on, their bond deepened. It was not built on force or obligation, but on shared understanding. They supported each other through quiet encouragement. When one felt tired, the other stepped in without being asked. The land responded to this unity. Harvest time brought better results than expected. The rancher felt pride again, not the proud defiance that once angered the powerful men, but a calm pride rooted in cooperation and respect. The town leaders noticed this too. They were not pleased. The punishment was supposed to weaken him, not strengthen him. They began to worry that others might see this outcome and start questioning authority. Control depended on fear, and fear was losing its power. Subtle pressure returned. Officials increased inspections. Taxes were questioned again. Small obstacles appeared, designed to remind the rancher of his place. But this time he did not face them alone. The woman stood beside him, offering insight and emotional strength. Together, they navigated each challenge carefully. They did not confront power openly, but they did not surrender either. They adapted, endured, and continued to grow. The rancher realized that strength did not always mean standing alone. Sometimes it meant standing together. As the months passed, the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a symbol, quiet but strong. People passing by felt it. Some felt inspired. Others felt uncomfortable. At night, the rancher often reflected on how much had changed. He remembered the town square, the $5, the laughter meant to break him. He realized that moment had not ended his life. It had stripped away illusions and forced him to rebuild on something real. The woman, too, felt the shift. For the first time in years, she began to imagine a future that was not defined only by survival. She began to think about belonging, about staying in one place not because she was forced to, but because she chose to. Neither of them spoke these thoughts out loud yet. They did not need to. The understanding was already there. What had begun as a punishment was now becoming something else entirely, a quiet transformation rooted in trust, shared work, and human connection. And though challenges still waited ahead, they were no longer walking toward them alone. The seasons changed slowly on the ranch, and with each change, life seemed to grow richer. Spring brought new shoots and green fields. Summer offered long days and warm sunlight, and even the hard winters no longer felt empty or cruel. The rancher and the woman found themselves in a rhythm that blended their strengths, and in that rhythm, something remarkable was happening. They were becoming a team, not because anyone forced them, but because they chose to rely on each other. At first, their teamwork was quiet and practical. The rancher handled the heavy labor, moving fences, tending to the animals, and repairing broken tools. The woman, in turn, cared for the garden, organized the household, and managed the small details that kept the ranch functioning smoothly. They rarely spoke while working, but their actions began to complement each other naturally. When he lifted a plank, she was already there with nails. When she prepared the soil, he knew exactly where to plant. No instructions were needed. Slowly, they began to anticipate each other's movements, understanding unspoken cues that made their work more efficient and productive. This silent partnership soon turned into a deeper bond. The rancher began to notice her intelligence and insight. She had an extraordinary way of seeing problems before they happened, whether it was the weather, the animals, or the land. She suggested planting crops in rotation to keep the soil healthy and knew when to let the animals graze freely without damaging the grass. The rancher realized that her knowledge was not something he could teach or replace. It was a gift, a way of seeing the world that he had never known. He started asking her opinions more often, and each answer she gave strengthened his respect for her. The woman, in turn, began to trust the rancher in ways she never had before. She saw that he listened, that he did not dismiss her ideas, and that he treated her as a partner rather than a servant or punishment. She shared small details of her past, stories of her childhood among her people, lessons learned from elders, and simple survival skills that had kept her alive in difficult times. These stories were not shared all at once, but little by little, they formed a bridge between their past lives and their present. Their connection grew further during the quiet moments. Some evenings after the work was done, they would sit on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Neither would speak immediately. They would listen to the sounds of the wind, the distant calls of animals, and the subtle movement of the trees. In those moments, there was no past, no punishment, no town to watch them. There was only the land, the evening, and the shared silence that now felt comforting rather than suffocating. One afternoon, a fire broke out near the edge of their property. Smoke rose into the sky, and the rancher grabbed tools to fight it. Without hesitation, the woman joined him. They worked together, guiding the animals to safety, dousing the flames, and protecting their home. That experience created a bond forged in action rather than words. They relied on each other completely and discovered that, together, they were stronger than they had ever been apart. The danger, which could have been terrifying, instead brought clarity and trust. The rancher began to notice other changes in himself. He was calmer, more patient, and more reflective. The anger and humiliation from the town square no longer ruled his every thought. The $5 symbol of disgrace that had haunted him for months had lost its power. He had survived the punishment, learned from it, and transformed it into something productive. He realized that dignity was not given by the approval of others. It was created through choices, resilience, and integrity. The woman also experienced transformation. She had learned to trust someone outside her own people, to find safety in a shared home, and to understand that life could offer something better than mere survival. Her laughter, once rare, became more frequent. She began to teach the rancher small skills she had mastered, from tracking subtle signs in the land to understanding animal behavior. She no longer saw herself only as a victim of circumstances, but as a person capable of shaping her life. As the weeks turned into months, the couple began to dream together. They spoke quietly about improvements to the ranch, planting new crops and raising animals more efficiently. These conversations were practical, but they carried hope. They also spoke about small joys, a garden in bloom, a clean barn, or a well-tended field. In their shared vision for the future, both began to understand that life could be cooperative, fulfilling, and even joyful despite the hardships they had endured. The town, meanwhile, began to take notice. Rumors spread about the rancher and the woman working together, about the thriving land and the quiet, strong household. People who had doubted their ability to survive began to whisper with curiosity instead of judgment. Some were impressed, some intimidated, and some ashamed for ever doubting them. The powerful men who had orchestrated the punishment now realized that their plan had failed. Instead of breaking the rancher and the woman, the punishment had inadvertently strengthened them. As their confidence grew, they began to take small, careful steps to expand the ranch. They repaired fences beyond what was necessary, planted new crops that required risk but promised reward, and worked the land more creatively. Their teamwork became a model of cooperation. The rancher learned to respect her intuition and knowledge, and she learned to trust his physical strength and steady presence. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. One evening, as autumn approached, they celebrated a small harvest. It was not a grand event, just two people sharing fresh vegetables and roasted meat by a lantern, but it was significant. They toasted quietly, acknowledging the work they had done together and the survival they had achieved. In that moment, they understood that their relationship was no longer defined by punishment or fear. It had become a partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. They also began to help each other in subtle, emotional ways. When the rancher felt frustration or doubt, she offered calm words or simply presence. When the woman felt fear or insecurity, he offered reassurance and steady action. They had become each other's anchor, providing balance in a life that had once been chaotic and cruel. The transformation on the ranch was visible not only in their partnership, but also in the land itself. Fields grew more abundant, animals thrived, and the once isolated ranch became a place of quiet productivity. Their home, once silent and tense, now echoed with the sound of work, conversation, and small laughter. The $5 humiliation that had marked their beginning was no longer a symbol of shame. It was a reminder of resilience, a story of survival and growth. By winter, they had truly become a team in every sense. The rancher had learned patience, listening, and humility. The woman had learned trust, hope, and the quiet strength of companionship. Together, they had transformed their lives, turning a punishment into a foundation for independence and cooperation. They no longer saw themselves as victims, but as creators of their own path. The town watched quietly. Some still judged, but many were inspired by what they saw. The rancher and the woman, once the objects of humiliation, had become symbols of resilience and quiet triumph. They had taken control of what they could, supported each other through challenges, and emerged stronger than anyone had anticipated. By the time spring returned again, the ranch was fully alive with new energy. Crops, animals, and land were thriving. The partnership between the rancher and the woman had solidified into something steady, enduring, and deeply respectful. They had faced humiliation, injustice, and fear, and instead of breaking, they had grown. The punishment that was meant to destroy them had, in a surprising turn of fate, created a bond stronger than either could have imagined alone. And in that quiet success, both of them understood a truth that had been hidden for so long. When people choose to work together, to trust each other, and to see the value in one another, even the most cruel circumstances can be transformed into a life of dignity, hope, and shared purpose. The years that followed were a testament to the power of resilience, patience, and quiet determination. The rancher and the woman had faced hardship that could have broken even the strongest spirits, yet they had turned that hardship into strength. Life on the ranch was no longer just survival. It was growth, learning, and even joy, though in a calm, steady way. Each day brought new challenges, but together they met them with courage and careful planning. The rancher had grown in ways he had never imagined. His pride, once tied to his reputation and wealth, had been reshaped. He now measured his worth not by what others thought, but by the choices he made and the life he built. His hands, calloused from years of labor, now carried not only strength but careful skill. He worked with awareness, observing the land, the animals, and the weather, learning to anticipate problems before they arose. The woman had taught him to pay attention to subtle signs, to read the environment with patience rather than force. The woman, too, had transformed. She had learned to trust someone outside her own experience, to see that not all people sought to control or harm her. She had learned to share her thoughts and knowledge without fear. Her strength, once hardened into survival instincts, was now balanced with confidence and calm. She contributed not just labor but wisdom, making decisions about planting, animal care, and household management. The rancher often said quietly that he could not have managed without her insight. Together they became more than partners. They became an unspoken team, understanding each other's thoughts and actions without needing words. During the planting season, they worked long hours in the fields, sharing tasks seamlessly. One would start a task and the other would anticipate the next step. When an animal needed care, they moved together efficiently, ensuring that nothing was missed. Their lives had become intertwined not by choice or obligation, but by shared purpose and trust. Over time, they also learned the value of small joys. The simple act of enjoying a meal together after a long day, watching the sun rise over the hills, or tending the garden on a quiet morning became moments of contentment. They celebrated these moments silently, appreciating them more deeply because they had endured so much hardship. Laughter, once rare, became a part of their daily life. It was gentle, unforced, and a sign that healing was ongoing. The town could no longer ignore the transformation. The ranch, once expected to crumble, thrived. Crops grew lush, animals multiplied healthily, and the land seemed to respond to the care and attention it received. Rumors of the ranchers and the woman's success spread quietly, and curiosity mixed with admiration. Some neighbors approached, seeking advice, while others kept their distance, unsure how to interpret this unexpected resilience. Even the men who had orchestrated the original punishment watched with unease. The plan to humiliate had failed, and instead, the rancher and the woman had become stronger, wiser, and more respected. Challenges continued to arrive, but neither feared them. When storms approached, they prepared carefully, protecting both the animals and the crops. When illnesses struck, they adapted quickly, learning to manage and prevent future problems. Each difficulty became an opportunity to work together, to test their cooperation, and to grow stronger. What had begun as a punishment had become a school for resilience, teaching lessons that no one in the town square could have imagined. The woman's past remained a shadow at times, a reminder of the hardships she had endured. Yet she no longer let it define her entirely. She shared parts of her history with the rancher, and he listened with patience and empathy. In return, he shared his own struggles, his dreams, and his fears. These exchanges were quiet but meaningful, forming a foundation of understanding that neither had known before. Together, they began to dream of a future beyond simple survival. They talked about expanding the ranch, planting new varieties of crops, and raising different animals. They planned improvements to the house, the storage areas, and the land itself. Each idea was considered carefully, tested in practice, and refined with experience. Their shared vision created a sense of hope that had been absent for so long. The town slowly came to accept this new reality. Some began to admire the rancher and the woman for their dedication and courage. Others, who had once looked down on them, learned that respect was earned through integrity, hard work, and perseverance. The couple did not seek admiration, but they accepted it quietly, knowing that their lives had transformed in ways that no one could take away. One day, while walking through the fields, the rancher reflected on the events that had brought them together. He remembered the humiliation, the $5 symbol of shame, and the forced marriage that had seemed unbearable at first. He realized that each moment of suffering had been a turning point, shaping the choices he and the woman made afterward. Without those experiences, they might not have found each other, and they might not have discovered the strength that now guided their lives. The woman, walking beside him, noticed his thoughtful expression and smiled quietly. She, too, reflected on the journey that had led them here, the fear, the isolation, and the gradual trust that had grown between them. She knew that life could have been cruel, but it had also been instructive. They had learned to adapt, to trust, and to build something meaningful together. Their bond had become stronger than any hardship, more enduring than any challenge. As the seasons passed, the ranch became a place of quiet stability and growth. Animals thrived, crops flourished, and the house was filled with the soft hum of contentment. Neighbors occasionally visited, seeking guidance or simply sharing conversation. The rancher and the woman welcomed them with calm confidence, offering advice, sharing their experiences, and quietly demonstrating the power of cooperation and resilience. The story of the $5 humiliation became a legend in the town, not as a tale of defeat, but as a story of triumph. People spoke of how the rancher and the woman had transformed their lives despite the odds, how they had turned punishment into opportunity, and how they had built a future together through trust, patience, and understanding. Their lives became a symbol of quiet courage and determination, inspiring those who struggled in their own ways. By the time many years had passed, the rancher and the woman were no longer defined by the past. They were defined by what they had created: a home, a thriving ranch, and a partnership built on mutual respect and shared effort. Their love was quiet but deep, formed not from immediate passion, but from understanding, trust, and the experience of overcoming adversity together. They also discovered the joy of giving back. When young travelers or neighbors asked for help, they offered guidance, shared tools, or gave advice. They taught lessons not through words of authority, but through example. Their story became a living lesson in resilience, demonstrating that dignity, strength, and hope are not taken, they are built, moment by moment, through choices, effort, and the support of those who stand with you. Even in quiet moments, they reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. The forced marriage, the humiliation, and the $5 symbol, all of it had seemed unbearable at the time. Yet, each step had pushed them to adapt, to rely on each other, and to discover a strength neither could have found alone. In a way, the hardship had been a teacher, guiding them toward a life they would have never imagined. Their bond remained strong because it was forged in adversity and nurtured in daily life. They continued to work, to learn, and to dream together. They celebrated successes, small and large, and faced challenges without fear. And as the years passed, they realized that their lives, once marked by punishment and control, had become rich with meaning, purpose, and connection. In the end, the $5 that had been intended to humiliate the rancher became a symbol of transformation. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, human resilience, trust, and cooperation can turn despair into hope, weakness into strength, and punishment into opportunity. The rancher and the woman had endured, adapted, and thrived. Together, they had turned a life of suffering into a life of dignity, independence, and quiet triumph, a life that no one could take away, a story that would inspire for generations. And so, the rancher and the woman lived their lives with calm confidence and shared purpose. The hardships of the past had not destroyed them. They had shaped them into people capable of building something lasting, beautiful, and meaningful. The ranch thrived, their bond deepened, and the world around them slowly recognized that true strength is not shown in power over others, but in the ability to rise, rebuild, and create together.